Hello, 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 everyone. And thank you so much for joining the Get Your Guy Coaching podcast. I have a special guest for us, and she's going to get, hopefully, our financial lives together because even if you feel like you got your financial life together, girl, no shade, but you just might not. So, Tiffany the Budgetnista, thank you so much for coming onto this podcast and gracing us with your presence and your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me, Anwar.
I'm so happy that you're here, girl. So introduce yourself for the ladies that may not know about you. I don't know if who those ladies are because I know that you're pretty much everywhere. You have an amazing book. You have so much, you're making so much impact in the world as it pertains to finance and financial independence and clarity and knowledge. So just share with them what you do and why you're amazing.
Well, thank you. So I am the Budgetnista. That's the name of my business. America's favorite financial educator, self-appointed.
Yes.
I've been doing it for 16 years, helping specifically women get and stay on financial track. We've helped over 2 million women in the last 16 years pay off literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of debt. Same for savings. A New York Times bestselling author of Get Good with Money. And I have a new documentary or a special on PBS also called Get Good with Money. So I'm just like your fairy financial godmother.
Oh, girl, don't come for me, girl, because you know I'm the fairy godbrother.
Oh, I didn't know
Oh,
that. Okay.
girl. All right, honey. That's why we're cousins, honey. That's why we're
Yes.
cousins. Yes, trying to get the girls together. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we're going to get into this because, obviously there is a direct line with the way that we interact with money and the way we interact with our love lives. It's all connected. And that's why I wanted to bring you on here so that we can kind of talk about that, delve into that a little bit, and really help the ladies and the listeners out in terms of how we can level up in both of these areas. Because if we do one of them, we're going to do both of them. So let's start with just talking about how money impacts dating and relationships from your perspective.
Well, the way money can impact dating and relationships is that one, if especially when you're older, that if you are dating someone who is not financially stable, they cannot show up fully and present in your relationship. It's one thing if you're both 19, everybody's broke, and
Yeah.
that's fine. Maybe parents are looking after you, but say you're dating in your 40s and you find someone that you think is great, but they're struggling financially. Even if it's not your financial problem, but because they have that problem, they cannot show it fully.
Yeah.
That's why one of my number one rules for dating is that you have to be financially sound. You have to be able to take care of yourself financially. Also, too, it can make for insecurities. I mean, more and more women make way more than men if you're in a heterosexual relationship. And it is something fairly new.
And I
How
am in a heterosexual relationship. A heterosexual, homosexual relationship, yes.
right?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that dynamic before it was like, okay, men are the traditional breadwinners.
Yeah.
But many women are actually making significantly more, especially Black women are
That's
some of
right.
the most educated in the space. And so, what does provision look like as a man? So sometimes that idea has to be re-explored or not, but certainly that affects dating as well of like, well, I don't actually need you to provide for me. So, well, at least not in the traditional financial sense. So it like leaves men kind of scrambling about like, well, how do I provide?
I'm so glad that you're mentioning this because I think it's, I'm telling people all the time that dating and relationships are changing because the dynamics between men and women are changing. And especially if you're a Black or brown woman, oftentimes when you tease out the data, Black women are making more than Black men. So we're trying to figure out what is your value add here, sir?
Hmm.
Right. And that is okay to ask, by the way, for all of the women that are out there that they should be bringing something to the table, right? They should be bringing a lot, actually. And one of my rules is that, if you're making less than six figures, then he needs to make at least 80% of what you make. And if you're making more than six figures, he needs to be making six figures. Because to your point about resentment and insecurity, I've seen many times, and you let me know if you've seen it too, where a woman who is successful and she's making a lot of money and the guy is making 50% of what she's making will try to humble her and try to gain control over her because of his own insecurities. Have you seen that a lot? And what are your thoughts on kind of my role?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a lot. I mean, I will say, some rules, I mean, obviously, some rules are broken. So I was fortunate. My husband passed away in 2021. That's not obviously the fortunate part because I loved him very much. I
Hmm.
met him in my 20s. We started dating in our 30s when I was building the business. And so I remember I was really struggling financially. And so we were dating in my mid 30s. He said, why not move in with me? And so I did. He paid all the bills, and I was able to build my business from it was six figures gross, which we both know means nothing because I think it was six figures gross, but I was taking home maybe $30,000, $40,000, a year after all the bills and taxes. But staying with him within 2 years, I went from a six-figure business to a seven-figure business because I no longer had to worry about the financial foundation of like rent and utilities and things. And my husband never made over $60,000, you know? So when I met
Oh,
him, I was making
okay.
significantly less. You know,
Uh-huh.
when I first met him, he was a maintenance man in the building, and I was a preschool teacher. This is how we met. So we were kind of like net, you know, even in our early 20s. I
Yeah.
always thought he was cute. And then Facebook suggested us in my 30s, and
Not
started.
Facebook, girl, for the win.
Yes, I was like, oh, I remember him. He was cute. And I was single, he was single, and we started dating. And then it got pretty serious. He was like, he was always the one that got away. But so I say all that to say that he was able to figure out provision in a way that made me feel safe because when we did meet, I made significantly less. And then, quite honestly, you know, by the time we got married, I was taking home 7 figures, take home, you
Hmm.
know, but that was as a result of that financial foundation in part because I didn't have to worry about bills and things. And so that was kind of like our way of navigating, like, because he wanted to still be a provider for me. And I love the fact that he was able to pay the bills because what it meant for me was left me space. His rule was you don't have to do the budgetnista. If any time, Tiffany, you want to quit because you don't want to do it, our life will not shift and change because we have created a life that is what I can afford for us, you know? And so in the beginning, I remember I just really pushed back because I wanted like a huge house, a huge this. And quite honestly, once business had we had some down years, I'm so glad that we did not do that because it would have put us in a space that we couldn't have been able to continue to afford. So it was one of the smartest things, that I did. So I say all that to say that that's not typical. So
Yeah.
because I've certainly dated men who've made less and have had tried to humble me,
Hmm.
and I think it's because we kind of grew up together in a way, in some ways, like as
Yeah.
adults, and it was before I started to make money that he played a role in my ability to. So I just say all that to say that, that in general, yes, I agree that, this financial component, you have to be so mindful, but there are some instances where, that it might work out because we had an amazing, amazing partnership. He was my biggest cheerleader. He always got so excited for the things that I wanted to do, any place I wanted to go. I felt with him, I really credit my ability to grow my business because I felt so free. I knew that I could do whatever I wanted, and that if it didn't work out, we're good at home. And to
Yeah.
me, that was the provision that I needed.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so
Yeah,
much. Thank you so much for sharing that.
yeah,
One of the things that, this is a podcast that centers the Black and Brown woman's experience. And I think we would be remiss if we weren't talking about kind of how we grow up with money,
yeah,
right? And so I'd love to talk to you about what you see in your work in
yeah.
terms of how Black girls see money, how they grow up with money, and how that affects them in their adulthood.
Well, what I see in my world, I mean, is that we, one, I think that Black folks have a lot of trauma, around money. Oftentimes there was not enough. A lot of Black women are taught, quite honestly, that they have to be the rooter and the tutor. If
Mm,
you will, meaning that like, okay, you're with someone, but what Black mama or auntie has not told you, stash away a little money on the side
right.
just in case this man does not work out. And so we see that a lot where it's just you're taught that you actually have to be your own savior, your own provider. And if you're fortunate and lucky enough that a man does something, that's great, but not to expect it, which I think has set us up for failure when it comes to financial relationships, not to expect that men can and will provide joyfully, and leaving space for them to do so. um and so like yeah, that's kind of the trauma that I see that folks grow up with, not having enough, but knowing that you are almost this hyper independence, which is really a trauma response.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I see that as well. And I think it's important for us to understand that, like, if you grow up with not a lot, you're also going to feel that way in love as well. I want people to think of love as a currency.
yeah,
And when we have it as a currency and you always feel like it's not enough, or I gotta always save, or it's not always going to be there, or let me shop at the thrift store versus the mall, or what have you. This is how we're thinking about love as well. And I think, part of the work that I do is understanding that you can have it all, that you can actually have what you want and what you need, and to actually step out of the prism that is holding you back there. Do you have any ways in which, from a mindset perspective, that you help your clients kind of step out of that kind of scarcity mindset that they may have when it comes to money and or other things?
yeah, honestly, and this is something I struggled with, that um to learn to ask for help.
Mm,
Like you have to be in your feminine to learn to ask for help. I really struggled because I was like, oh, I'm a boss chick. I got this. I'm one of 5 girls. And my father, was a provider. I did not know until I got older that my mom made more than him. You know,
Mm,
not significantly more, but more. She was a nurse and he was an accountant, and a CFO of a small nonprofit. But she made more. But the dynamics in the household would not suggest that. I didn't know that until like post college, you
mm,
know.
mhm.
And so, but one of the things like growing up, my father made us like very hyper independent, because I'm Nigerian and Nigerian culture is very male dominant.
I've
And
heard.
because right, because there were no boys, I think I would have told out totally different. Had he had a son, it would have been, this is my son. I'm going to raise him with all the tools and resources to look after my girls. But
Mm,
because there were no sons, my dad was like, I'm basically teach you to be my daughter and my son, you know? And so at the time, you know, it wasn't, you know, bad to learn to be independent, but I learned to be hyper,
mm,
independent. Where it was like, because my dad was like, you will take care of you, you got it. His thing was, if you decide that you want to marry, I want you to marry for love, not because you need this person. But I took it to the extreme where it was like, I don't need nobody. I got it. And I had to learn, and this is what I teach clients now, is that I had to learn that to soften and ask for help. And it took, quite honestly, like my husband forced help on me. You know, like I'd be struggling with it. He's like, "What? Why do you have your luggage in your hand?" I was just gonna, no. Why did you bring the laundry upstairs? I'm like, well, no, just leave it downstairs. When I get home from work, I will bring it upstairs. Tiffany, it's heavy. So it was really odd for me to sit back and be like, people are going to do things for me. And it took, quite honestly, when he passed away, I could not help myself. And I finally had to just relinquish that and just say, like, hey, neighbor, can you bring this inside for me? You know, hey, friend down the street, can you bring me some food? Hey, and so this asking for help has softened me, to just expect that people are going to show up for me.
mhm.
You know, that like, so I am way softer. So I'm dating now, and it's a different Tiffany because I have the expectation of like, of course he's going to get the door, you
Yeah,
know, of course he's going to pick up the check. You know, like he doesn't have to wrestle me down like my husband had to. Like, stop doing things. Like, why do you have a shovel in your hand, ma'am? The snow is not your responsibility. You know,
right.
and so it's just the asking for help, not just asking for help from men, but allowing people to help you, family, friends, you know, like call your best friend. Hey, girl, when you come, can you bring me some wine? Hey, you know, because you soften, and because what you're really creating is the expectation that their world will meet your needs, that you do not have to meet all of your needs yourself.
That's right. Again, love is a currency. When
Mm-hmm.
you allow people to do things for you, you will actually create more love currency in your life. Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned your upbringing, your Nigerian upbringing. What have you seen the difference as it pertains to money in life, but also in love when it comes to African women and African American women?
Well, I'll say that the Nigerian culture, and I mean, I'm Igbo, so certainly I can't speak for all aspects. Like there's Yoruba, there's Edo, there's all these different
Mhm.
cultures within the culture. But in general, it's a very male dominant culture. And so the expectation is men will provide for you financially. And if he's not, because if I'm being honest, my parents were not pleased when I met my, my late husband, because they were like, where's his degrees? Ma'am, you have your bachelor's and your master's. You have this, you have, like, so they were like, I don't understand. Like your mama got her master's, I got my master's. And so there is a sense that men, they were basically asking, how is he going to provide for you in a way that we think is matches what you're deserving. And so that is the expectation that men will provide. And I don't know necessarily that that is the expectation that I've seen with my African American sisters.
Yeah.
That men are capable of providing. And now certainly this is just blanket statements because there are certainly a ton of Nigerian African men who don't, and certainly there are a ton of Black men who do. But that's just the expectation is what I see from women, which is different. Because it is very much like, what does your husband do?
Yeah.
Like you're like, honestly,
No,
if
no shame about it, right?
no, what does your husband do? Like, oh man, like even let me tell you something. When you go to a Nigerian party, they have something called the high table. They don't do as much anymore, but they say your title when they introduce you. So they're gonna say Dr. Chike Ozuwon and Dr. Mrs. And if your name doesn't have a title, they'll make it up. They'll say engineer Lola. I'm like, that's not a title. They will, because it's like, oh no, I'm sorry. Accomplishments are always on display.
Yes.
Always. And so the expectation is there's all this accomplishment. Everybody is, even my friends who want to do something else. I have a friend who wanted to be a DJ. He went to law school, got his law degree, and his mother was like, okay, if you want to DJ, fine. But you always have your law degree. That is very typical. That even if somebody's in the arts, you'll find out, oh yeah, I'm a chemical engineer, but I make this artwork, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, so the expectation is that No, you are going to secure your financial future. If you want to do something on the side and make that your life, great. But do this first because we don't know what the world, has in store for you. But I know if you've got your degrees, then you'll be okay. But yeah, that is the expectation is that the person that you bring to the table is going to be a doctor, a pharmacist, a lawyer, an engineer. And if they're not, and what's different too that I have found that it's not even about money in the sense of like, well, this person is rich, yes, but they're like, what education do they have? Because in their mind, rich can come and go, but education will always provide. So
Mm.
that's what I always found that really like, oh, but such and such is a DJ and he makes $300,000 a year. Okay, well, when he doesn't DJ next year, then what?
Hmm.
And so that's the expectation that I found that's different.
Thank you so much for sharing that because I think it's important to understand that there are different mentalities here. And oftentimes, when I'm hearing from African American women specifically, they're giving a lot of these men chances, men that aren't as educated or are not making as much money. And I wanted you to share that just so that for anyone that's listening, to realize that you get to have these sort of expectations as well. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a bitch. It doesn't make you snobby or too bougie. Dating, similar to money, is really needs to be rooted in safety. It
So
has to be rooted in, are you safe? And as a woman, that really needs to be your number one priority. I think so
yeah.
many of us have grown up with keep your head in the books, right? Get those degrees to make that money.
Mhm.
But we also have to think about that in terms of relationships as well. And I think that my African sisters do a really good job of that. And I would love for my Black American sister to be able to hold that a little bit more. I think many times, we've grown up in environments, and this for whatever decade we're in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where we saw our mothers working so much and
Mhm.
our fathers not working as much or making, having lower wage jobs because they didn't have as much opportunity. And so that becomes something that is normalized and that is okay. And if you see your model of your mother accepting that, you think it's okay for a woman to be able to accept that. But I'm here to just say, in the 2000s and 2020s and beyond, that's not going to be acceptable anymore. So I'm just sharing that with all of my listeners out there that these men are going to have to provide in terms of safety for you. Do you
Yeah.
have anything you want to share?
Yeah, I was gonna say that like I think it's one of the reasons why I chose my husband is because my dad, as imperfect as he was a super provider.
Hmm.
I remember if it was gonna take 3 jobs for us to have tennis lessons, it was gonna take 3 jobs. And it was never any it was like, oh, okay, so this summer you're all doing tennis. I played tennis from second grade all through college. I didn't realize how expensive tennis was. I'm one of 5 girls. And it was like whatever it takes.
Yeah,
And even when I used to date, like in my teen and in college, I remember there was no little boy that could say, I'm not gonna, I'm like, well, I'll just ask my dad. Like
yeah.
one, he's gonna say, I'm gonna show you how you can get it, but if you need it, I got you. And so
Yeah.
when I met my husband, that is what triggered for me in a good way, because I saw that he was a super provider.
Hmm.
Not just for me, he was the type that the neighbors would come to and say, oh, Jerome, can you help me do this? Or like if someone was away on vacation, I'm like, why do we have all this mail in our house? Oh, the neighbors across the street. I don't even know their names. He was one of these people that provided in general. Valentine's Day would come. If I have sisters that were single, flowers for everybody. One of my sisters has 2 little kids. I remember he had his work mom make a Valentine's Day dinner for all of us and had Valentine's Day dinner. My 3 sisters, one of them is in Chicago, so there's 5 of us, but my 3 sisters, myself, my niece and my nephew were all in red and pink. I look back at those pictures fondly. He was providing for like, I got all y'all. He talked to my parents more than me sometimes. I'm like, who are you talking to? Oh, your dad. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? He said, whatever he wants. He said, Tiffany, at that age, I call and I let him hang up,
Hmm.
let him be the one. And so to me, that is what I love so much is that he figured out provision from the financial sense, but just in totality. And I felt so
Emotional,
safe. Yes,
spiritual, intellectual,
yes.
100%.
Yes, but also financial too, because I knew that like the bills are paid and I don't have to worry about it. And if I don't want to do budgetista, okay. And if I do, even better. And so I just say all that to say that like, yes, I want that for everyone. And I want that for myself again, if I'm being candid. And
Yeah.
it's been hard dating because, finding, that I know I'm 45 now. And so finding that I'm like, wow, I did not realize just how like, I mean, I knew I had something special and amazing, but I'm realizing like, okay, that it's not as readily available because my husband was black, black, blackly black. I'm talking about black American. So I just want also to, because I don't want anybody to think I'm speaking down about our black brothers and sisters. I'm like, no, my husband was not Nigerian. He was like, North Carolina, moved to New Jersey, with his people, like Newark, New Jersey, black.
Mhm.
And so, but just the best man that I know, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
You talked about your dad. My dad worked three jobs.
Mm-hmm.
He was a painter, and then he had his own painting business on the side, and then in nights time he would work in the paint department of Home Depot to make sure that. So that's my model of seeing
Mm-hmm.
like what it looked like to like, no, we're gonna work, we're gonna bring in this money, and I just want to offer to everyone that is listening because there's some shame in wanting these things, right? And they don't want to be called a gold digger or anything like that. It's not about gold digging. It's about gold stacking for the times that are not going to be great because life is 50-50 and you want to
Mm-hmm.
be protected in those ways. So life it's just going to get more and more expensive as we've seen pre and post pandemic, right? I think the
Mm-hmm.
general costs have gone up 20-30%, if not more.
Yes. Yes.
So please understand that like this is more important than it's ever been. And so any of the, not wanting to want that, I want everybody to kind of shed away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also too, you're looking for good habits, you
Yeah.
know,
Let's
because
talk about that. Yeah.
yes.
Partner
So
financial habits.
yeah, so meaning that if someone, someone can make a lot of money. I mean, as I've been dating, I mean, because of I had built a multi-million-dollar business and I said, oftentimes my take-home pay can be seven figures, sometimes multiple seven figures in a year of what I actually take home. And so because of that, there's certain rooms I get to be in where there are men who that is typical, if not more. I'm talking about black men. And I still see habits that I'm like, if this business doesn't work out for him, he's going to be broke. So it's not
Talk to me about the
just
habits, girl. What habits do we need to be looking out for when we're dating? Now you're freaking me out.
no, because sometimes I will see men who their ego has allowed them to overspend. Like I
How can you
know, okay,
tell
it's
who's an overspender and who's not?
so for example, it's like, okay, so you've got two Ferraris. I mean, I know you made, $10 million last year. But a lot of men will be like, so I mean a lot of real estate men. So they'll be wealthy, but cash flow poor.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's just like, okay, but you're living in a way that, you can't keep up with this, because I could do the math. I'm like, the budgetnista is budget. I'm like, okay, carry the one, and I can
Yeah.
kind of tell, I'm like, okay, this is more so a response to your ego.
Mm.
And if you have a bad year, you don't know how to slow down because you just said you had a bad year, but then you just bought this just G-Wagon. But I'm like, the math is not mathing, And so to me, I'm looking for someone that is living within their means. If their means are 10 million, great. But like you shouldn't be living at 10 or 20, But also too, I'm looking for someone who I always say, like, yes, you're gonna. One of my friends would always complain that he caught gold diggers all the time. I said, well, you fish with gold. So I'm also looking to see if you are fishing with gold, you're gonna get goldfish. So if that's what you're dangling in front of me, because oftentimes men, they don't know what I make because we're not talking about that. But I can tell the in those rooms sometimes the impression is if I let her know how much I'm making, this will make me more attractive. And certainly it can, but I'm just like, if that's what you're telling me is that's the only thing you bring to the table. So I'm
Yeah.
also looking for that, where it's like, oh, okay, that you think that you can purchase my attention, my love, my whatever. And I'm like, I'm just not interested in that. I'm certainly it's nice if a man, makes millions of dollars, but I'm looking for also kindness. When's the last time you spoke to your mama?
Right.
Like how are you showing up for your community? Are
Mhm.
you just out here bragging? And because I've seen those same men a few years later with nothing,
Mhm.
because I'm just like, okay, because you were living way above your means. But also too, sometimes you see these men like I don't like when men do this, Tiffy, you're different than other women. I hate that, like and so because what that tells me is that like, that doesn't impress me, or men who don't take care of their children.
Mhm.
Like I just don't understand like why somebody would be with someone like, because if you get a baby by him, one day you might be on the other side of that. So these are kind of like the financial habits, like, you're overspending, you're not taking care of your financial responsibilities, you lead with ego, you like there's not open conversations about money because I think that money should be, if we're together, this kind of open conversation, because I signed an NDA, so I'll keep it as broad as possible. Sometimes women of note, like I call the blue check brown brigade, right, will reach out to me and say, can you help me? I'm talking about women who are married to some of those powerful men in industries. And I'll be like, is this really this person? And it'll be like, so I have access to whatever credit card I want, but I don't, nothing else. I'm like, ma'am, you don't know none of the bank accounts? None of that? And so that is also a red flag because what that means is, once he's done with you, the credit cards get cut off, then what?
Right.
So financial secrecy is something too that's is a red flag for me. That happens a lot. You'd be surprised how many women they've had a great, amazing life, but the kids are getting older and they start to realize, like, hold up, once my baby finishes college or goes off to college, is he gonna get rid of me? Possibly,
Mhm.
because now we don't have to worry about child support.
Wow.
And so like that comes up a lot. So that's something too. I know everybody aspires to these very, very wealthy men, but you want to vet for not just the wealth, also
Right.
for like what kind of person is this?
Of course. Of course. So when do you think that we should be having some of these financial conversations, either within dating, like casual dating, more serious dating, and then kind of marriage? Like, what sort of conversations should we be having at all three kind of phases of dating and relationships?
So in casual dating, I don't mind having like kind of like casual financial conversations. Like, like you can have like you can tell a lot by a person by like, oh, what are some of your goals? You don't have to say financial goals, but what are some of your goals? Like,
Right.
oh, I really would love to save for a house. Okay, now like or like I really want to go on vacation, or you could tell a lot by how someone pays for things. Like I mean, I'm someone who I use my credit card a lot because I get points. Do they seem nervous when that bill comes?
Mhm.
um, and yeah, so that these are kind of early conversations, like you in general asking about financial goals, but just also seeing like what their reaction is when it comes to like talking about your goals too.
Yeah.
Because if there's an offense, because some men take great offense when women have opinions about money. So if I'm sharing about like like some of my financial goals or things that I'm working on, I'm looking also to see how is his reaction to that. Is he
Yeah.
kind of like yeah 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 or interested? Like,
Right.
oh, tell me more. So these are kind of like those are the dating. Now relationship
Oh,
stuff. Oh,
wait,
we
wait,
get to
before we go on to that, I just want to co-sign on this because there are a
yeah
lot of women that are like literally interviewing these men about their financial history and things while you're casually dating. And I just want to say, I think that that is inappropriate.
yeah
I think that it is, these are not, this is getting to know you. This is not like, you're not supposed to be interrogating somebody as if they're on the witness stand about their financial history and things like that. So I just want to co-sign on that because I think a lot of people, and I get it, right? We want to keep ourselves safe, especially if you're a black or brown woman. This is very
right
important because y'all are not trusting people because we may not have had a lot of people to rely on in the past. And so I understand that you're trying to like cross your T's and dot your I's, but I
yeah
do want to just mention this point. In casual dating, I don't want us to have the deeper financial conversations. His wallet is not your business right now.
hmm and you
Yeah,
can tell a lot. You can ask questions that don't because asking somebody about like what their goals are or what's the last trip you took.
100%. Yeah,
These are things that like if you listen, men will tell you.
yeah,
Like,
100%.
like let's just say I was dating this guy who does a lot of real estate, and he was just like, oh, I just closed on this deal, but I don't know if it was a good idea, So I'm just listening with my financial ear, like, okay, what are men like to talk about the things that they're up to,
Yeah,
and so it could tell you a lot without having you for you to dig deeper. But
yeah,
then dating, I believe, okay, now we can get to the nitty gritty. Let's
yeah.
talk about
And
like credit scores. And so, for example, my husband and I, when we started dating, I said, okay, like, I'd like to save to go on vacation, you
mhm,
know? And so it gave me like some insight into like the way he navigated, financially. Because and also too, this will help you to help them develop like, like better habits. So I remember I was like, this is we're dating. I moved in and he said something that kind of triggered something. I think he said something about his car note being too high. And I said, well, let me take a look. It was. I was like, what in the hell? Why is your car note so high? And he said,
mhm.
my credit score. And I said, okay. That's when we looked. I was like, can we look up your credit score? Like I said, this is dating, we're together. And he
Yeah,
said, okay. And it wasn't great. It was like five something or whatever. And I said, now that to me is not a deal breaker. A deal breaker is the habits that brought you here.
right.
And so I said, now if the credit score is five something because he's a gambling addict, then no dice.
Okay, so we
But
were talking about the 500 credit score and what the
yes,
habits are to get you there. And
yeah.
one
So
of the things
go
that
ahead.
I always want to understand is this person open-minded enough to change those habits?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Because oftentimes someone is there because they do not know.
Right.
They're not
Especially
willfully.
us.
Yes, they do not know. And that's what happened. I said, why is it a five something? He said, I don't know. I said, are you trying to fix it? He said, yes, I got something called a secured credit card. So for those who don't know, a secured credit card is literally a credit card that's secured with your money.
Mhm,
Anywhere from $300 to $1,000, you give it to a bank, they put it in a savings account for you, and they give you a credit card of that same limit. That
mhm.
way, if you swipe 300 and don't pay that bill, they'll just take the 300 from your savings account. So as an unsecured credit card is what most of us have, which is that you just swipe Basically, you're taking a loan out every time you swipe your regular credit card. So he had a secured credit card, which a lot of people use to build their credit. It's a great tool for that. The limit was like, I don't know, $500 or something, which is very typical when you first get one. And he had a balance of like four something on it. And I was like, well, this is why your credit is low because you're maxed out. You
Right.
know, so one of the issues is that he paid a lot with cash. So he also had something called a thin file. A thin file essentially means you don't have much credit history, so therefore you have bad credit. Think
Hmm.
about like a driver. Like my stepdaughter Alyssa is 18. So she's a bad driver, not because she's been in any accidents, but she just started driving. So by nature of you being new, you're bad at it. That's how
Hmm.
credit works. If you have very little credit, they consider you bad at it. And so he had very little credit history. So he got that secured card. And I said, well, do you have the $400 to pay off this bill? He said, yes. But the people at the bank said to run it up and just pay a little bit a month. Why did I tell my man that? Because they do that because they want that interest. But
Right.
he's just like, this is what the people said. I said, that's a lie. They want you to pay interest on that 500. So no, I said, babe, if you just paid off in full, your credit score will raise. He was like, oh, okay, paid it off. And I remember we were at the bank maybe like a month or so later, and he had like this 400 something dollars in his bank account. He was like, I have extra money in my bank account. And so we asked the banker. He tried to leave. I said, sir, let's make sure this is your money first. You know, black folks was like, hold up, a little extra. I was like, let's make sure. Turns out, because he paid off the card, they said, we trust you now. No more secured card. Now you have a regular card, and we're giving you back your deposit. And his credit score raised 100 points in those 3 months.
Awesome.
And so from there, he was like, okay. But you see, to me, that if now, like I said, if his credit was bad because of gambling or like, I'm not going to judge you because you have poor credit because you had a medical emergency. How is that? You know what I mean? Like to me, we can work with that. You know, so really to me, that's in this dating phase. We're looking at the habits a person has. Do they
Yeah.
have the ability, the willingness, and the openness to learn new habits or to develop new habits in order for them to be financially sound? And so we worked on that a lot. And by the time he and I got married, we were really on the same page. That's when I was just like, okay, like let's buy a house. Or before he passed, what he still worked at where he worked basically for the city, but he had state insurance, which was like supreme. I mean, you can get acupuncture for free. So one
Hmm.
of the reasons why he still worked there, because it's like, okay, solid, one, you get a pension, you know, solid income, but the insurance was amazing. And our financial advisor was like, Tiffany, best thing to do, Jarrell, you work here until 45. You would have turned 45 this year. And then when you retire, because you've had 25 years in, you get to take that that insurance, that health insurance with you.
Right.
So it would be perfect because it's like, because child health, the cost that I pay out of pocket for health insurance. So it would have been great because our ultimate goal was that we had purchased some properties when he was here. And I was like, okay, let's purchase more because now he was a super. So he managed 300 units. I said, if you could do 300, babe, you could do 4 or 5 of our own. And so the switchover was going to be like, we've got these 5 or 6 properties. You manage that. That's your business. We have health insurance that is supreme that we get to keep with us. And then I continue to work as a budgetista if I so choose. And so having a financial plan is what you also want to start developing. Now, this is the marriage component of like, so what does this look like? What do
So
we want
let's hold
to
on
do?
1 second. So, because I get a lot of questions all the time. So, when would you want to ask about their salary and share your salary? At what point do you think it's good to actually have that conversation?
I would say the transition from just dating to like dating exclusive. Like you're like, this is your man. You
Hmm.
know? So there's usually like this transition where you guys are talking about like, I really like you. Matter of fact, you might be saying, I love you. And this is when you can, I don't know that I ever asked specifically, but it can come up in conversation. There's ways to say like, you know, like I'm pretty like straightforward. Like when it came to his credit score, I was like, well, what's your credit score if your car notices this much, you know? One of the ways you can ask is let's do a budget together.
Hmm.
You know, so you don't have to be like, what's your, it's like, because I was like, babe, so you have to put the peas with the pizza. Everybody wants pizza. So for pizza for me was okay, vacation. And the P's was I wanted to know more of his financial business. I was like, oh, I want to go on vacation this year. Let's do a budget. So we
Hmm.
sat down and was like, okay, so what are you making monthly? This is what I'm making. What do you, you know? So this is when I could really see the financial. What does the debt look like? What does this look like? Because we're working toward this vacation, which is the pizza. So this is one of the ways to introduce that. Find something that there's a yes for both of y'all. Maybe
Hmm.
it's vacation. Maybe it's like some extravagant restaurant or experience you want to experience. Do a budget together where it creates a safe space for both of you to bring your finances to the table because it's like I'll show you mine, and you'll show me yours. And so that was one of the ways that I was able to do that. And I would say, at least by the time you're definitely like exclusively dating each other, so boyfriend and girlfriend, but toward the end of where we're dating just in general, you can start to have those kind of conversations. If you're like worried about making this person like your person, create a budget together to do something special and see what comes up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I always say also when we're getting a little bit serious, right? So 6 months and then later when we're talking about, potentially moving in together, what that would look like, how we would need to save, like,
Yes.
joint accounts, things like that. It's a great time to be like, well, let's budget so that we understand what we would need to have to
Yeah.
potentially move in, let's say in summer 2026 or a
Hmm.
year from now, right? And so that gives you another opportunity. I know because I can hear people like, well, I'm in a 6 month, 1 year relationship now. Well, girl, do it now. If you
Yeah.
that's on the horizon, right?
Yes.
Again, because I think we grow up like not talking about money a lot. And so I think it really hinders us when we're in the dating and when we're in our dating lives because we don't want to talk about it. And then we get upset when we realize that, this person has $50,000 worth of debt and now you
Hmm.
feel like you're in charge of it and now you've grown resentful because of it.
I was like, you don't want to buy your own ring. Meaning so like, because a man will propose to you, swipe that credit card, and then you guys are together. Now you paid off that credit card bill. Sis, you bought your own ring. You know what I mean? It's
Hey, girl, that is it. Don't buy your own ring.
yes, do not buy your own ring. This would be the title of the episode of this.
Yes, exactly.
you
I love
know, because I remember, and so yeah, so yes, making plans together that external to money but involves money conversations is one of the best ways to pull those things out. Because is there a willingness to share? Is he hiding? This tells you a lot about who he is, how he shows up financially. We can't make plans together. You can't share this with me. Before I jump into this like feet first, maybe I need to explore this further. And I will say this that I don't believe in joining bank accounts until marriage, or if you're not going to get married, like this is like like life partnership.
right.
um so just because there are legal components to that, because you can still have a joint financial life without having to join
Yeah.
bank accounts. And
Yeah.
so to me, the way that I have seen work best when it comes to joining bank accounts, like after you get married or decide we're in a lifelong partnership, is there's ours and mine, and like yours too. Mine meaning like each person says mine. So we had a joint checking account, and this was our bills checking account. And so all of our bills got paid from that checking. I was in charge of making sure bills were paid. He put the money in the bills checking account, and it was my job to make sure like, okay, it went to where it went to. The only money I added to the bills account was I send money to like I know you don't agree with this, but I give money to my parents, not because they need it. I know.
You got your African thing going on,
Yes,
girl.
yes, yeah. And then here's the thing, not because they need it, it's because, well, one, I'm quite honestly, I'm wealthy now. And so it's like my gift to them that I send every month, you
Mhm.
know? And it doesn't, it's not even a dent in like what I don't even spend 10% of what my take home pay is. So it's
Mhm.
just like, mommy, daddy, I love you, buy yourself something nice?
Yeah.
So I do that every single month. So that went into the bills account because I automated the bills from there. But that's the only money I placed in that bills account. And that was our joint checking. But then I had a separate checking for myself. He had a separate checking for himself where he could do whatever he wanted with that excess. I could do whatever we wanted. We had a joint savings account. Our joint savings account, now that's where I heavily put, money in. So he saved a little in our joint saving, but most of his money went to our bills. So
Mhm.
we would decide we want to purchase a house or a car or this. And so we would put the goals that we were saving toward in our joint savings. But then I had my personal savings and he had his personal savings. Same
Yeah.
thing for our investment accounts. We had a joint investment account, but then separate investment accounts because we had our own separate retirement funds. So I like the idea of I have my own, and it wasn't a secret. If I wanted to look, I could see what he had, and he could see what I had individually. But what it made is that there's autonomy because we're adults. Because if I'm being honest, like he had to teach me that because in the beginning I was kind of like he used to call me the budgetnista bully because I'd be
Mhm.
like, you got new sneakers? How much for those? You got,
Right.
and he'd be like, babe, I the bills are paid.
Right.
Save to save,
Gotta
and I
hear that,
realized,
girl.
yes. And so what I realized is that I was trying to control,
Right.
because I'm like, well, I'm the budgetnista. I know all the things. And that's when I said, Tiffany, if we have these accounts like this, if the bills are paid and savings is saved and the investments are invested, he could buy 10 pairs of Jordans because it did not affect the safety of our household.
Right.
And so it allowed me to just relax and say, because I'm like, this is not a boy. Like he
Right.
has the autonomy to do what he wants as long as we're good.
Yeah.
Well, then, yeah. So that really worked out well, and we didn't have any financial kind of strife when we came up with that with
Yeah.
that solution.
I love that. So that's good for kind of in the marriage phase,
Yes.
right? Or long-term partnership phase. Are there any other sort of conversations or ways that you think about money when it comes to the marriage phase? What like, for example, what about prenups and things of that nature? What are
I
your
believe in a prenup. Honestly, I had one because by then, even though, like I said, I credit my husband with creating a safe environment for me to grow my business, it still was my business.
right?
Um, and I had several businesses back then. And so before we got married, I think when we got engaged, I told him I was like, I wanna get a prenup. And he was like, okay. Honestly, he was chill about it. I think he thought prenups from like TV, where he
Yeah.
was like, ooh, can we put in there how many times a week we could have sex? I'm like, Jarrell. That is not that is not what a prenup is about. I
Don't
told
you
him like,
mess.
right? I said, but it's really more of a financial contract. And he was like, well, I don't want anything from you. He was like, Tiffany, I know you built that. And I said, and I love that, but I know that that's why you create my attorney always says you create these financial contracts when the love is in the air. Because when
Right.
it's not, sometimes it's not about love, when someone is they're just wanting to hurt you,
Hmm.
and they could do so financially. And so, yeah, the prenup that we created was really straightforward. It was like, I own the business. Like any business that I created was mine. Anything that he brought to that was his prior to us getting married was his. And whatever we created together, like I said, we bought homes together, was ours equally to split. It felt fair. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, what's ours is we split equally. And he
Right.
was just like, okay, so yeah, so you get to create. I mean, everybody's different, so you get to create whatever that kind of looks like for you. But I think that a prenup is a good idea, especially if you think you might not be making a ton of money now, especially if you're like building something or in a career or something where you're thinking to yourself, I might bring more to the table. I have friends who like weren't making as much, and then 5-10 years later they're getting divorced and they're the significant breadwinner, and he's trying to take them.
Girl, we're
Yes,
seeing it in Hollywood now. All
yes,
Black actresses who are
yeah, I
paying
saw that.
for it. This,
Yeah,
literally
no.
every other year, it's another one.
Yes, I say prenup, prenup, prenup. I mean, maybe the only case where maybe is if you're getting married at like 21,
Hmm.
and both y'all literally came with nothing, which would indicate that you probably both built it together. That's probably the only time that I might say like, okay, well, you're super, super young. You both come to the table with zero. Whatever is produced because of this marriage is as a result of you both being together, maybe. But other than that, if you're like grown and getting married, like at 30 plus, highly consider it. It's not significantly expensive, but it is so worth it. Make sure you get it actually notarized and signed, and you keep a digital copy and you keep a physical copy. So that way, if it ever goes down, we're just like, okay, we're clear. Like, this is what's going to happen. And you want to do it significantly before the actual wedding, or else there could be like, oh, this person was forced to sign under duress if you guys were to break up.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any other things we have to think about when we're in the marriage phase or long-term relationship phase?
To think about, so when you're in marriage, like it's different. Like, so when I'm dating, I'm like, my expectation is you got it. And even in like, boyfriend, girlfriend, but in the marriage phase or deeper dating, that it really becomes a space where like I am here to also make sure that I got it too for your so my husband had an aneurysm 3 years before he passed away from his a second aneurysm. And we were dating, I was living with him, and he was out of commission for like 5 months. He had brain surgery and was out of commission. And I had applied for disability for him, but the money didn't come in until after he had already gone back to work because it takes that long. Not
Hmm.
always, but it did. The bills were on me, but it wasn't for me to be like, oh, I didn't sign up for that. It's like, no, no, I actually did. This is my partner who's been looking after me. And as soon as he went back to work, it went back to what we did before. And so
Yeah.
these are the kinds of things that like financially thinking about those things. And also too, but even in debt, I have to say, honestly, this is a man who, like I said, never made over 60. He left a significant windfall. I won't say windfall, but a significant amount of money for my bonus daughter. College is paid for. First home was paid for because of the insurance that he left for her. Like she doesn't, she is, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say she's wealthy, but, not too far, relative. I
Yeah.
mean, certainly I didn't have this level of money at 18, it's all locked up in trust and things like that. So, she just had to have direct access. Um, and so those are the conversations to have too, is that, and even so when he passed away too, for me, I was left with a significant amount of money. I'm living in this beautiful condo that I paid for cash
Hmm.
because of the money, part of the money that he left me. I didn't have to come out of pocket. It's just, and so I say that to say that there are ways to provide no matter your income. Um, And, I'm looking in general, you should be looking for a partner that understands that what do I need to do to make sure that I provide for my family in life and in death. So these are the questions that you should be having in these deeper, like when you're married and deeper conversation or deeper relationships. And it's like, how will I make sure that you're okay? I get to just miss him. The financial component is taken care of. He was like, oh, no, no, no. He was always really big on that. Like, y'all are going to be fine. You'll miss me, but you will not miss a step financially. And we have not.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and
Yeah.
also all of your vulnerable truth, right? I really do appreciate that. I think that this is often things that aren't necessarily talked about, but I think are
Mhm.
important, especially in our community. So I really appreciate that. Um,
Mhm.
for those people that want to learn more about what you do and work with you to kind of get their own financial life together, but also to get themselves prepared to get into an amazing relationship and have that financial knowledge, how can they get in touch with you to potentially work with you?
Well, one, hopefully you'll watch my special on PBS, Get Good with Money. But also, two, I have so many resources. If you go to thebudgetnista.com, one of my favorites is our Get Good with Money plan, which walks you through these 10 steps to something I call financial wholeness. And this is budgeting, savings, debt, credit, learning to earn, investing for both wealth and retirement, your net worth, insurance, your financial team, and estate planning. So I walk you through myself and the experts that help me get on track. It's a course, and it is directly based upon my New York Times bestselling book, and it's helped, I want to say, over 150,000 people get and stay on financial track. And all of that is available at thebudgetnista.com. And I'm the budgetnista everywhere. So you'll find me everywhere there too, like social
Yeah.
media, Instagram, all the things.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Tiffany, thank you so much for being here. I so
Thank you for
appreciate
having me.
you.
Thank you.
Ladies, you heard it here first. Do not pay for your own ring. If there's to be learned from this episode. Thank you for listening as always, and I will see you on the flip side. Bye bye.
Bye.